Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe and leave a like. It means everything to us. Please share this video with someone you care about and switch on post notifications so you won't miss any future videos. Thank you for always supporting. Now, relax and let's begin. Joy Adebayo entered marriage with a soft, grateful heart. Shane was calm, hardworking, and careful with words, the kind of man who noticed when her slippers were wearing out and quietly bought a new pair without making a show of it. In the first weeks, she told herself she had found peace. Even the large family house seemed full of promise. But Karen Adebayo, Shane's mother, moved through the home like someone guarding territory. Her smile was neat, her voice gentle, yet every room seemed to obey her before it welcomed Joy. It began with small instructions. "Shane does not like too much pepper," Karen said when Joy cooked. "Fold his white shirts separately. He prefers the blue plate for breakfast. Don't laugh so loudly when he is reading." None of it sounded terrible alone, but together it made Joy feel like she was studying for an exam she had not agreed to take. One evening she asked lightly, "Mama, is there anything I am doing right?" Karen smiled without warmth. A wife should not ask that. She should simply know. The deeper Joy settled into marriage, the clearer it became that her husband's life had long been arranged around Karen's presence. Karen knew his office schedule, his preferred soap, the names of his account officers, and the amount he sent to distant relatives. Joy would wake and find Karen already discussing Shane's lunch with Cook, already choosing his tie, already reminding him of some small task. Joy felt silly for minding it at first. She told herself closeness between mother and son was not a crime. Still, something about it kept squeezing her heart. One night, after Karen corrected the way Joy arranged Shane's medicines, Joy finally spoke. "Shane, sometimes I feel like I am borrowing my own husband." He looked tired, then gave the familiar answer that would slowly wound her over the years. "Joy, please, that is just how my mother is. Don't read too much into it." Joy stared at him. "But I live with it every day." He touched her arm gently. "Please be patient." His kindness softened the moment, but it did not solve it. That was always the problem. Outside the house, Karen was almost untouchable. At church, women praised her discipline and called her a prayer warrior. Neighbors admired how she had raised Shane after her husband died. During family gatherings, people would say, "Karen is a strong woman. Not many widows keep their homes together like that." Joy would stand there smiling, holding trays or greeting guests, while the same woman who lightly humiliated her at home was celebrated like a saint. It made Joy feel invisible in a peculiar, lonely way. Public respect gave Karen a shield Joy could not pierce. Karen's cruelty never arrived as open abuse. It came like a pin pressed gently into skin. "Joy, some women marry before they mature. Your mother should have taught you better." A decent wife does not answer every question with explanation. Sometimes Karen would simply look at Shane after Joy spoke, and that look alone suggested failure. Joy began wondering if she was too emotional. Yet in quiet moments, she would stand before the bathroom mirror and whisper to herself, "You are not imagining this. You are only trying to survive it politely." Karen started interfering more boldly once she realized Joy would not fight back publicly. When Joy cooked a goosey soup, Karen tasted it and called Cook over. "This is not bad," she said, "but let Cook make the real one. Shane likes it richer." Cook lowered his eyes and obeyed. Joy forced a smile, but the humiliation stayed with her all evening. Another day, Karen asked Shane, right in front of Joy, "Are you sure your salary is enough?" Some young wives spend carelessly when they are still trying to impress outsiders. Shane never joined in, but he rarely corrected his mother firmly. That was what hurt Joy most. He would say, "Mama, leave it," in a tired voice, then return to silence. One evening, Joy asked him, "Why do you always make peace with the person hurting me?" Shane frowned. "You make it sound harsher than it is." Joy gave a bitter laugh. "Because you only see it after it has landed on me." He looked ashamed, but still said nothing strong enough to change anything. Their marriage began bruising where nobody else could see. If Shane had been cruel, Joy might have left emotionally long before trouble deepened. But when Karen was not hovering around them, he was thoughtful in ways that made her heart ache. He would bring Puff Puff home because he remembered she liked it hot. He would call during work breaks and ask, "Have you eaten?" On difficult evenings, he would massage her shoulders and say, "You carry too much in silence." There were nights on the balcony when he made her laugh until she forgot Karen existed. Those moments kept love alive where resentment might have won. Joy clung to those private versions of him. She believed the man who tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and whispered, "I'm lucky you came into my life," could still become the husband she fully needed. Sometimes, She imagined they would move out into a small apartment where no third voice lived inside every decision. Things will get better, she told herself while folding clothes, watering plants, or waiting for him after work. Hope became her habit, even when reality gave her fewer and fewer reasons to trust it. Karen saw what Joy desperately wanted to believe. She saw that Shane's laughter was softer around his wife now. She saw the way he began checking Joy's expression after tense family conversations. She noticed him buying small gifts without being reminded and defending Joy's tiredness with unusual gentleness. Karen never named her fear aloud, but it settled heavily inside her. She was losing her place as the first voice in her son's life. Instead of admitting jealousy, she called it concern. In her mind, she was not possessive. She was protecting what she had built. That fear sharpened her behavior. When Shane and Joy spoke too long in private, Karen would suddenly need medicine. If Joy suggested a weekend outing, Karen would complain of weakness. If Shane praised Joy's effort, Karen would sigh and say, "A mother knows when her child is changing." One evening, after Shane spent nearly an hour helping Joy in the kitchen, Karen watched them from the doorway and murmured, "Marriage has a way of making sons forget where they came from." Joy heard it clearly. Shane pretended not to. Silence again became Karen's greatest ally. One Sunday afternoon, after lunch, conversation drifted toward Shane's late father. Christy mentioned the village land, while an uncle asked whether the pension papers had finally been updated. Joy barely paid attention at first, but Karen's face changed so quickly that it startled her. Karen cut in with unusual firmness. "Those matters are settled. There is no need reopening old family issues." Shane looked down at his phone, avoiding the conversation. Tim Cole, who had dropped by briefly, glanced at him in a way that suggested unfinished business. Tension flickered, then disappeared beneath polite talk. Later that evening, Tim called Shane into the sitting room. Joy, passing with a tray, heard Tim say quietly, "You still need to regularize those documents before someone complicates matters." Karen entered almost immediately. "Tim," she said, smiling too tightly, "must every conversation in this house sound like court?" Tim answered calmly, "Prevention is cheaper than dispute, Mama Karen." Karen laughed, but her eyes were sharp. Joy walked away with the tray, unsettled. She did not understand the matter itself, only that money and documents made Karen tense in a way ordinary family talk did not. Christy Adebayo was one of the few people in the family who treated Joy with uncomplicated warmth. She hugged her properly, asked real questions, and never turned every discussion into a test. During one visit, after Karen stepped out to take a call, Christy held Joy's hand and said softly, "You are trying your best in this house. I can see it." Joy almost cried from the relief of being seen. Then Christy hesitated, looked toward the corridor, and added, "Just be careful how you interpret things here. Not everything is what it looks like." Joy frowned. "What does that mean?" Christy opened her mouth, then shut it again. "It means old family habits can be dangerous." Joy pressed further, but Christy only shook her head. "This is not my story to tell. I just don't want you to carry everything on your head." The warning was vague, almost frustrating, yet it stayed with Joy long after Christy left. That night she lay beside Shane and watched him sleep, wondering how a home could feel so normal from the outside, and yet carry so many unspoken things beneath its daily routine. Karen's illness announced itself quietly. First it was fatigue, then repeated stomach pain, then sleepless nights that left her unusually weak in the mornings. Doctor visits multiplied. Church women came with anointing oil and serious faces. Prayer meetings filled the sitting room. Shane, usually steady, started looking frightened in ways Joy had never seen before. The man who solved problems with calm silence now paced hallways at dawn, checked his mother's pulse twice after midnight, and forgot meals. Seeing him vulnerable softened Joy despite everything. Pain had entered the house, and pain changed the temperature of everyone's heart. Without being asked, Joy stepped into caregiving. She arranged medicines, changed Karen's bedsheets, helped her sit up, and stayed near when weakness made walking difficult. Relatives praised her patience. Not every daughter-in-law would do this, they said. Karen accepted the care with unreadable eyes. Sometimes she complained sharply. Sometimes she stared at Joy with what looked almost like sorrow. One afternoon, while Joy adjusted her pillow, Karen held her wrist and said, "You are more stubborn than I thought." Joy managed a small smile. She did not know whether it was insult, compliment, or something stranger between both. Caregiving exhausted Joy in ways she had not anticipated. Karen could wake her at 2 a.m. for water, reject the water after one sip, then accuse her of moving too slowly. By morning, Karen might thank her weakly and call her "my daughter" before afternoon brought another cutting comment. The unpredictability kept Joy emotionally off balance. There were moments when she stood in the bathroom, hands against the sink, breathing hard to stop herself from crying. Then she would wipe her face, return to the sick room, and continue caring for the same woman who had spent years making her feel unwelcome. The tenderness confused her more than the cruelty. Some evenings, Karen's voice softened unexpectedly. She would say, "Sit with me a little," or touch Joy's fingers and whisper, "You are stronger than many women." Once, with tears in her eyes, Karen murmured, "Maybe I judged you too quickly." Joy's chest tightened. She wanted to believe illness had humbled the older woman. That belief was dangerous, but she did not know it yet. Hope once again moved back into her heart, not brightly this time, but like a candle she protected carefully from wind. As Karen's illness deepened, Shane began noticing more clearly what Joy had carried for years. He saw her massaging his mother's feet while suppressing her own back pain. He saw her skip rest to manage medicines, visitors, and meals. He heard Karen snap at her, then watched Joy answer with gentleness instead of retaliation. One evening, after Joy nearly fell asleep on the dining chair, Shane knelt beside her and whispered, "I should have done better by you." The apology was simple, but it landed heavily. Joy looked at him and saw guilt finally waking where convenience had slept. That new awareness drew them closer. Shane began defending Joy in small but meaningful ways. "Mama, she has done enough for tonight. Cook, let Joy rest. I will handle it. Joy, go and sleep. I'm here." These were small sentences, but to Joy, they sounded like doors opening after years of knocking. One night on the veranda, Shane said quietly, "When all this passes, I want us to talk properly. No excuses." Joy stared at him for a long moment. "Do you mean that?" He nodded. "Yes." For the first time in months, marriage felt like it might still survive. Karen noticed the shift before anyone spoke of it openly. From her bed, she watched Shane bring Joy tea without being asked. She heard new gentleness in his voice. She saw him linger at the doorway after Joy left the room, his eyes following her with a tenderness Karen had once enjoyed exclusively. Illness had weakened Karen's body, but it sharpened her fear. She understood what these quiet changes meant. The center of Shane's emotional loyalty was slowly moving. To Karen, this was not growth. It felt like betrayal dressed as marriage. Her questions grew stranger. "If something happened to Shane, would you stay in this family?" she asked one afternoon. Joy blinked. "Why would I leave?" Karen held her gaze. "Money changes loyalty. Illness exposes it. Death reveals it." On another evening, she asked, "Do wives truly love, or do they simply position themselves?" Joy laughed nervously. "Mama, you are talking too much. Please rest." Karen smiled thinly. "I have lived long enough to know what people want." Joy walked away unsettled, not realizing those conversations were not random. Karen was measuring loss long before it arrived. Tim returned on a humid afternoon with a brown envelope under his arm. Joy was taking Karen's lunch inside when she heard low voices in Shane's room. Later, while arranging tablets on a tray, she passed the corridor again and caught fragments. Insurance update, nomination, pension file, regularization. Shane sounded cautious. Tim sounded firm. "Do not delay this, Shane. If anything happens, ambiguity becomes war." Karen, resting with her door half open, clearly heard enough. Her face tightened in a way Joy had never seen before, less offended, more alarmed, as though a hidden clock had suddenly started ticking. That evening, Karen called Shane into her room. Joy, carrying soup from the kitchen, froze outside when their voices rose. "Why am I hearing of documents from outsiders?" Karen demanded. Shane answered more sharply than usual. "Tim is not an outsider. He is helping me put things in order." Karen's voice trembled, but not from weakness. "Order for who?" There was a silence, then Shane said, "For my family." Joy's fingers tightened around the tray. It was the first time she had heard Karen sound panicked, rather than authoritative. Something important was shifting, and nobody was explaining it. Cook had worked for the Adebayo family long enough to understand that silence was often safer than speech. He moved quietly through the house, noticed everything, and discussed almost nothing. Yet during Karen's illness, even he began to sense that tension had changed shape. Twice, he saw Karen, weak as she was, searching through drawers when she thought nobody was near. Another morning, he noticed her standing by Shane's wardrobe, breathing hard but determined, as though looking for something urgent. When she saw him, she snapped, "Why are you standing there like a ghost? Go and prepare tea." Cook said nothing, but his eyes missed little. He noticed Karen asking strange questions, whether Shane had gone out alone, whether Tim had visited, whether any envelope had arrived from the lawyer's office. Once she asked him, almost casually, "Have you seen any blue file in Shane's room?" Cook shook his head. "No, Ma." Her shoulders dropped in frustration before she remembered to look frail again. That small transformation unsettled him deeply. He had seen Karen controlling, proud, and difficult. He had not seen her afraid. In quiet ways, the house had begun to feel like a place guarding secrets. Karen's condition worsened over the next weeks, and conflict seemed to dissolve beneath approaching death. Visitors lowered their voices, curtains stayed half-drawn. Prayer became part of the furniture. Joy spent long nights in Karen's room, waking at the sound of every restless breath. Shane moved between office calls, hospital follow-ups, and silent moments of grief that made him look older. For a short while, the old tensions retreated. There was no energy left for ordinary battles. Even Karen seemed softer some days, speaking less sharply and watching Joy with wet, lingering eyes that suggested unfinished thoughts. One particularly quiet night, Joy sat beside Karen while rain tapped the windows. Karen looked thinner than ever, her authority shrinking inside a failing body. "You have served me," she whispered. Joy's throat tightened. "Please don't talk like that, Mama. You will get better." Karen gave a weak smile that held no real belief. Joy felt pity rise where resentment had lived for years. For the first time, she nearly mourned Karen before death arrived. That mistaken tenderness would later break her heart in a different way, because compassion had finally opened the door through which betrayal would enter. The night Karen died was heavy with rain and power fluctuations. The generator coughed outside, and the rechargeable lamp by the wardrobe cast a pale, trembling glow over the room. Joy sat in a plastic chair by Karen's bed, exhausted beyond tears. Her body ached from sleepless nights. Karen's breaths had become shallow and scattered, each one sounding like a struggle she might not win. When Karen lifted trembling fingers and motioned weakly, Joy leaned forward at once, expecting a request for water, prayer, or a final message for Shane. Instead, Karen gripped her wrist with surprising force. Karen's eyes widened, urgent and wild in a way that made Joy's blood turn cold. With a dry whisper scraping through her throat, she said, "Run from my son." Joy froze. "Mama?" she breathed, but Karen's lips moved once more without sound. Then her body slackened. The room went still. At that same moment, footsteps sounded from the corridor, and Shane entered carrying a knife he had just used to cut open a rice sack outside after Cook called for help. Joy turned, saw the blade, remembered the whisper, and the world inside her shattered all at once. Joy's scream tore through the house before thought could catch up with fear. She stumbled backward, knocking the chair aside, her eyes fixed on Shane's hand. Shane stopped in the doorway, shocked. "Joy?" he said, his face changing when he saw Karen lying motionless. But Joy could no longer hear tone or explanation. Karen's final whisper roared in her mind, "Run from my son." She backed away, trembling violently, as Cook rushed in from the corridor and neighbors began calling from outside. The scene looked too perfect, too terrible, as though death itself had arranged it carefully. "What happened?" Shane asked, dropping the knife at once. "Joy, what happened?" But when he stepped toward her, she cried out again and pressed herself against the wall. By the time Christy, Cook, and two neighbors entered, panic had already become interpretation. Karen was dead. Joy was shaking. Shane had been holding a knife. Nobody asked the right questions first. By dawn, grief had joined rumor. People whispered in corners. Mama Karen warned her. She must have known something. No woman screams like that without reason. The damage spread faster than truth ever could. By morning, Joy could no longer bear the house. Every corridor felt haunted by Karen's last breath. Every doorway by the sight of Shane standing there with a knife. She packed with trembling hands, barely remembering what she folded into her bag. Shane stood near the bedroom door, hollow-eyed and exhausted. "Joy, please don't do this like this," he said softly. She could not look at him for long. "I heard what she said, Shane." He swallowed hard. "And you think you know what it meant?" Her silence answered him more painfully than accusation would have. Joy left for her aunt's house with tears she tried hard not to shed in public. On the way, the city looked normal in the cruelest possible way. Buses moving, traders shouting, life continuing while hers had split open overnight. She was not leaving only from fear. She was leaving from heartbreak, confusion, and the inability to separate the husband who had once held her gently from the shadow Karen had placed over him in death. Back in the empty house, Shane sat on the edge of their bed and stared at her missing scarf on the chair, feeling abandoned inside his own grief. Stories multiplied before Karen was even buried. Churchwomen lowered their voices when Joy passed but made sure she still heard enough. Some mothers know their children deeply. Maybe Karen saw signs before now. Quiet men can hide a lot. Extended relatives added their own versions, decorating uncertainty with confidence. The more people talked, the harder it became for Joy to hear her own thoughts. Everyone seemed eager to explain her life to her. Some treated her like a survivor. Others treated her like a wife, refusing to admit what she already knew. Public sympathy began to feel like another kind of pressure. Yet beneath the noise, one stubborn truth disturbed her. Shane was not acting like a dangerous man exposed. He did not threaten, hide, or turn angry. He looked broken. During the burial preparations, he moved mechanically, like someone grieving two losses at once. When their eyes met from across the compound, his pain did not look performed. It looked personal and bewildered. Joy hated herself for noticing. She wanted certainty, because certainty would hurt less than confusion. But as the days passed, the image of Shane's face, shocked, wounded, desperate to explain, kept pressing gently against the story everyone else seemed so ready to believe. After the burial, Shane began sending voice notes. Joy ignored the first 3, then listened to one alone at night with shaking fingers. His voice sounded tired, not defensive. Joy, please. I need you to remember who I am. Not only what happened in one terrible second. Another came later. I was cutting rope for Cook. That is all. I swear to you. Then another. You know me. Even if you cannot come back, at least do not let fear rewrite our whole life. None of the messages contained threats, excuses, or anger. They carried confusion and hurt, which unsettled her. Joy replayed the notes in secret, ashamed of the small crack doubt was opening inside her fear. If Shane were guilty of some hidden darkness, why did his pain sound so helpless? Why was he asking her to think, not pressuring her to obey? One rainy evening she listened again and whispered. Then why did she say it? That question began changing shape. At first it had meant, what was Shane hiding? Now, for the first time, it also meant, what was Karen doing? The difference was small but dangerous. It nudged the story away from terror and toward suspicion. Christy came to see Joy without announcing herself, carrying fruit and the careful expression of someone about to cross a dangerous line. After a long silence, she said, I don't know everything, but I know Aunt Karen was angry these last months. Not just sick, angry. Joy looked up. Angry about what? Christy hesitated. Documents, changes Shane made, things she found out late. Joy felt her heartbeat quicken. What kind of changes? Christy shook her head. I only overheard pieces. But I know her mood changed badly whenever Tim's name came up. The room went very quiet. Joy remembered Karen's odd questions, her panic over paperwork, the sharp conversation with Shane. For the first time, the dying whisper no longer seemed purely spiritual or maternal. It began to smell of motive. Why didn't you tell me before? Joy asked. Christy looked ashamed. Because nobody in this family likes touching trouble directly. We survive by circling it. Joy laughed bitterly. And that nearly destroyed my marriage. Christy nodded sadly. That is why I came now. I think your fear may be standing on someone else's lie. Tim agreed to meet Joy only after Christy begged him. They sat in a quiet restaurant where the clinking of cutlery sounded too ordinary for the weight of the conversation. Tim placed a slim file on the table but kept his hand over it. I am not here to force reconciliation, he said. I am here because silence is helping the wrong person, and she is already dead. Joy stared at him. Tim continued. Shane recently updated his insurance, pension nomination, and some investment instructions. He listed you properly as beneficiary where necessary. Joy blinked, stunned. Why? Tim frowned slightly. Because he is your husband. Her throat tightened. He never told me. Tim's voice softened. He wanted to finish everything first. He said you had endured enough uncertainty in that house. Joy looked at the file with trembling eyes. These were not the actions of a man planning harm. They were quiet acts of protection. Suddenly, Karen's agitation over paperwork made terrible sense. Joy sat back slowly, feeling the false story crack open beneath her. If Shane had been securing her future, then Karen's final words were not warning. They were interference. Once suspicion turned toward Karen, memory rearranged itself, painfully. Joy began revisiting old conversations with new eyes. Karen asking whether wives remained loyal when money was involved. Karen demanding to know why Shane was putting things in order. Karen watching her with a measuring sadness that now seemed less like remorse and more like calculation. Joy felt sick remembering the tenderness she had trusted. With Christy's help, she started tracing documents quietly, asking careful questions and revisiting small details that once seemed meaningless. The process felt less like gossip and more like emotional excavation. They searched slowly. Christy spoke to an older uncle about the village land. Tim checked dates and signatures on older filings. Joy went through emails Shane had forwarded long ago but never explained fully. Every clue deepened dread. Karen had been worried before she became truly weak, which meant her fear was not the confusion of illness alone. One evening Joy sat with Christy over untouched tea and whispered, "What if she did this on purpose?" Christy looked down. "Then the worst thing in this story is not death. It is how calmly some people can wound those they claim to love." Cook spoke only after Joy visited him privately and promised she was not looking for gossip but truth. He sat on a low stool behind the kitchen, cap in hand, his voice careful. "Madame Karen searched Olga Shane's room more than once," he said. "Not ordinary looking. Serious searching." Joy's chest tightened. "For what?" Cook shook his head. "I don't know, madam. But once I saw paper burning in the drum outside. Photocopies, maybe." She asked me later whether Olga had gone to see Barrister Tim. He swallowed. "I kept quiet because this is their family matter." His testimony was simple, which made it powerful. There was no drama in his tone, no attempt to exaggerate. He was just reporting what his eyes had seen. Joy felt cold from the inside out. Karen, even while weak, had been moving through the house not only as a sick woman, but as someone still protecting a hidden agenda. "Why didn't you tell me?" Joy asked softly. Cook looked miserable. "Because in houses like that, servants learn that truth can cost a job faster than lies." Joy nodded slowly. For the first time, pity for Karen began giving way to horror. The full truth arrived in pieces, then settled with devastating clarity. Karen had manipulated property documents tied to Shane's late father's village land and related family assets. Through a quiet chain of influence, altered instructions, and suspicious filings, she had tried to structure those matters in ways that excluded Joy from practical security. She had counted on Shane remaining emotionally dependent and too conflict avoidant to confront her thoroughly. But Shane's quiet decision to update his own financial records in Joy's favor had disrupted that plan. What Karen saw as a daughter-in-law had become, in legal reality, the true center of Shane's future. When Joy understood it fully, she could barely breathe. Karen's dying whisper had not been a mother trying to save a wife. It had been revenge from a woman who could not bear losing control. Even on her deathbed, she had chosen poison over peace. "She wanted me to run," Joy whispered to Christy, "so Shane would look exactly like the danger she needed him to be." Christy nodded with tears in her eyes. The revelation hurt not only because Karen had lied, but because she had used the sacredness of last words to do it. The more Joy thought about that night, the more its cruelty unfolded. Karen knew Shane's personality well enough to weaponize it. He was quiet, serious, emotionally hard to read when shocked. He had spent years absorbing tension instead of confronting it. To outsiders, that silence could easily look sinister. Karen also knew the timing of her death would throw the house into chaos. Add a knife in Shane's hand by coincidence, and fear would complete the story faster than reason could interrupt. It was a final act, crafted from intimate knowledge of everybody's weakness. Joy wept that night not only for what Karen had done, but for how thoroughly she had nearly succeeded. She had turned grief into accusation, coincidence into suspicion, and a flawed husband into a feared one. "How do I forgive this?" Joy asked aloud to no one. The room gave no answer. The real tragedy was no longer the scream in the sick room. It was the years behind it, the manipulation, the guilt training, the way Karen had shaped the emotional weather of that house until destruction could bloom in one whispered sentence. Even death had not stopped her from controlling the living. When Joy finally met Shane again, he looked thinner, as though grief had been eating him from the inside. They sat across from each other in Tim's office, the air thick with everything unsaid. Joy placed copies of the findings before him, the questionable transfers, the timelines, the testimonies, the changes she now understood. Shane stared at the papers in silence for a long time. When he finally lifted his face, it was shattered. "My mother did this?" he asked, though his voice already knew the answer. Joy's eyes filled. "Yes. And she used me to finish it." Shane bent forward, elbows on his knees, both hands covering his face. His grief was terrible to witness, because it was larger than embarrassment. He was mourning the collapse of the mother he had defended all his life. "I kept asking you to manage her," he said hoarsely. "I thought I was keeping peace. I did not know I was feeding something." Joy said nothing. There was nothing easy to offer. After a long silence, Shane whispered, "She trained me to choose silence, and I almost lost you because of it. That was the first true beginning of his honesty. Truth did not repair everything at once. Joy did not suddenly fall into Shane's arms because evidence had cleared him of the fear Karen planted. Love was still there, but trust had been badly damaged by years of his silence, not merely by one terrible night. Shane understood that now. For once, he did not ask for quick forgiveness. Instead, he said, "I will not hide behind my mother again. I failed you before she died, and that also belongs to me." The sentence mattered because it contained no excuse. It was simple, painful ownership. Their rebuilding began in slow conversations. Joy told him how lonely marriage had felt while he kept smoothing over Karen's cruelty. Shane listened without defending himself. He apologized for every "please be patient" that had forced her to carry pain quietly. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes the meetings ended with aching silence rather than progress. But even that felt more honest than the old life. One evening Joy said, "I need to know you can choose me clearly, not only when loss scares you." Shane nodded. "Then that is what I will spend my life proving, not merely saying." They decided not to rebuild inside Karen's shadow. With Tim's help, the property irregularities were corrected where possible, records were updated properly, and every legal area Karen had clouded was brought into clearer order. Shane insisted on transparency this time. He showed Joy documents instead of promising vaguely that things are handled. It was a new habit for him, born from painful lessons. They began planning a home of their own, not grand, just peaceful, a place where no third voice lived inside every cupboard, meal, or private conversation. The decision felt practical, but also deeply symbolic. Moving did not erase grief. Karen was still dead, still once beloved by the son she damaged, and once pitied by the wife she betrayed. Yet distance changed the air between Joy and Shane. They cooked together, made simple purchases together, argued honestly, and learned how different marriage felt when nobody was quietly steering it from behind. One afternoon, while unpacking plates, Shane asked softly, "Blue or white for breakfast?" Joy looked up in surprise, then laughed through tears. "Whichever plate we choose," she said. It was a small moment, but freedom often arrives dressed as ordinary life. Months later, during another rainy evening, Joy found herself remembering the night Karen died. For a second, the old fear tried to return: the dim light, the whisper, the knife, the scream. But the memory no longer ruled her. She now understood what that moment truly was. Not prophecy, not divine warning, but the last reach of a woman who could not release control, even at death's edge. Karen's words had once echoed like a curse. Now they sounded smaller, stripped of mystery, exposed as manipulation. Understanding had not erased pain, but it had taken away the whisper's power. Joy stood by the window while Shane joined her quietly. He slipped his hand into hers, and this time she did not feel trapped between love and fear. Their ending was not perfect. Too much had happened for innocence to return. But truth had entered where silence once lived, and that truth had made room for a better beginning. Joy leaned her head lightly against Shane's shoulder and said, "Some people are feared because they are dangerous. Others are dangerous because everyone fears questioning them." Shane squeezed her hand. In that honest silence, their real marriage finally began. We've come to the end of the story. Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like, share, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification. Thank you so much for watching.